Welcome to Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. I am Juliette Hahn. I'm here with my co-host, Brent Sopel, and we are here to change the narrative. We want to educate, but we also want you guys to understand what it is like to be dyslexic and how things can change. So join us every week for Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. Welcome back to Word Blindness. I am Juliette Hahn, and I'm here with my co-host, Brent Sopel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're laughing.
2, 3.
And it gives us a countdown. I'm laughing because whenever Brent and I get on, we start talking and then we start getting really good stuff. And I'm like, wait, I didn't record. Pause. We have to record. And then we hit it. And then
It's
it
like
gives us a
Sesame
countdown.
Street, though. It gives us the full countdown. 3, 2.
It really does, though. And it is because we have a thought and it's like, hold on to that thought. Don't
Isn't
forget
it
it.
the same numbers?
So
Is it the same size of numbers, too? Yeah.
It is totally like Sesame Street, except the count's not there. You need to actually
count.
do it.
See, that's this level of this podcast, Sesame Street. So just so you guys know, if you're new listeners.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. So funny. So that is kind of before, if people like kind of filmed it before, we like get into really good conversation. And then again, it's like, oh crap, wait, this should be recorded. We need to be sharing this. So that's what happens. And then we have to pause because it's like, get ready. Gives you a countdown.
3, 2, 2. The count is, I like the count.
Yeah, right. I know. Maybe we can do like a graphic of the count. Okay. So seriousness. So this is Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. And Brent and I started this. We've been recording now, excuse me, just dropped something.
Wow, look at you. Throwing things at me already.
It was one of my fidget tools.
Your husband
flew out of my hand. So clearly we're a little punchy today on this episode. It's been a long week, long weekend. But what we do is the reason why we want to bring these stories is because they're so important. And as we continue through life, not just sharing our stories, not sharing, just our kids' stories, but in all of our discussions, we, come across people that will share something and it brings up things that we are like, you know what, more people need to know about this. So one of the things that we were kind of discussing this weekend is the size of the school. So now this is like, you guys have been, if you're new to this, you need to go back because you need to listen to the beginning. Like when you have a young kid, you don't know what's happening. You need to get the neuropsych. Don't trust the school. You have to kind of go outside and then have the school try to be the support, but you really need to be the advocate. But then there's also the other side of where there's dyslexic schools that are specifically for dyslexia, and they are out there. There's different sizes. They're really expensive, which is one of the reasons why, Brent has his foundation. It's like really to bring awareness and educate, as we talk about all the time, because not everyone can afford it. And it's actually, the majority of people can't afford it. It's actually ridiculous how much it is. Yeah. And then you have to go through, and we've talked about this, you have to go through where you have to sue the school to have the school pay for some of it, if what you can do. And then you're putting all this money out in attorney fees, and it's really a shit show. And it's really stressful. But it brought up a good point because we were talking about the size of the school, and you had a situation where you were talking with someone and they were saying their child was in a small school and what kind of was the next step, 7th and 8th grade. Like, so do you want to kind of, as I blabbled on, bring talk about that?
It's, I had a father call me and it's interesting, being Canadian, from God's country, I always have to figure out who I'm talking to. Is it a Canadian or is it American, because there was no such thing as, middle school in Canada. Mm-hmm. So I went to school from kindergarten to grade 8.
Right.
So there was no middle school. I'm like, middle school? What the hell? What is that? I've never heard about that. So, never mind kilometers and miles and Celsius and Fahrenheit. It's, grade 9 or I still don't even, freshman is grade 9. I still don't even know that.
Yeah. Freshman.
So he said to me, his son's a little bit dyslexic and he's going into middle school. I said, okay, what does that mean? So where he was from, 7th and 8th was middle school. So I guess, each state, is spread out differently. So I've heard anywhere from, grade 6, 7, and 8, I think are the concises of the middle schools. So he's like, my son's now going to the middle school. from grade 6 to grade 7, where he's going from a very small school to a huge school. And the question that there's a few things that came up with me is, first off, I've never heard of a dyslexic high school. I'm sure that they're out there, but everybody always says, charter schools, not even some ADHD, different places like that. They all go to grade 8. I'm sure there's a few that go into high school, but they don't. So they talk about the size. He's like, "Brent, I'm afraid that he's going to get lost." He was kind of, we got him to grade 6 in a smaller school, and he was learning who he was and what he needs. But now I'm afraid. Mm-hmm. I'm like, rightfully so. I said, but there's a few things I said to him. I said, one, obviously the teachers are going to have a heck of a lot more students. You're going from a smaller school where they'll know everybody, probably life story, to a middle school where they won't. They'll probably just barely know their name, or if they're like me, have no clue what their names are. And that's why everybody's got nicknames. And you're going to have to be, as a parent, very proactive into the merger of a bigger school. Now, if that's going, from I think elementary to a middle, or a middle to a high school, as you just said, you can never trust a school. In this situation, you can't either. I think we've talked this on a few times. You're going to a new school, which usually means a new district, which means new people running programs. Every time that my kids moved, oh boy, your paperwork got lost. What do you mean paper got lost? It was across the street. Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened. What do you mean? So it conveniently, things happened. So that, and I'm not saying they do this purposely, but you have to walk over that, if they have a 504 or IEP. You've got to go over, you've got to set up that meeting. Don't let them, you got to be proactive. And I said to this dad, I said, set up a meeting with each teacher. Sit with them and say, this is his IEP 504. This is what it needs. Is it extra time? Whatever that is, this is what they need. Don't wait for the quasi group meeting in the, with the special ed. Meet with them one-on-one and be very proactive, during the years, knowing that they're going to drop the ball. They're going to screw up because it's a bigger school. They don't have the time. So you've got to know that. Don't be shocked. Like, oh, Mrs. Smith didn't do that. No, she's not going to do this. So stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
But I also said to him, let's just get him through grade 12 or senior year, as you Americans like to say. And I say that respectfully, and I say that as, he's a smart kid, but he doesn't need to, he's going to get a 4.0 in a different way than another kid, non-dyslexic. And they teach us differently than we should be. So don't hold standards to the same as somebody else. And that's the biggest thing that I always talk about, you and I talk about, is self-esteem. Kid wants to be with his friends. You're worried about how he's going to transition, rightfully so. But if he's sitting there for 2 hours over an English assignment, who cares? Because at the end of the day, if he has a 3.4 when he graduates or a 2.4, that doesn't mean anything different. If you have a 3.4 with zero self-esteem or 2.4 with all self-esteem, that's a massive difference.
Yeah. And the thing is, and the thing that's also important is if you're sitting here thinking, well, I don't have a choice where my kid's going to go, right? You have to make it work. And that's why Brent is putting all those, kind of stipulations in. You have to be the advocate for your kid. And it's exhausting. I mean, we both have been there. It's exhausting. It is exhausting. And Brent knows the story, but my oldest, who's dyslexic, when we lived in Connecticut, he went to a dyslexic school it was called Southport School. And where he joined in, I guess it was 4th, 5th, 6th. Yeah. So he was 4th, 5th, 6th. This school went from kindergarten to 8th grade, but there really was no grades yet, but there was no real grades. So it was like your ability. So you could be in with younger kids, you could be with older kids. It was really your ability. They didn't really talk about grades and, it didn't matter. And it just kind of, wherever you were. So were moving, and it was like, okay, he was going to be mainstreamed. So we knew that, that he was going to get the tools that he had from school. But also when you're going into middle school, middle school really, when you
They're
really
the worst kids ever. I wanted to kill every middle school kid, my kids. I'm like, what is wrong with you guys?
Yeah. Middle school is just a tough age. It's adolescence. It's so many different things that, as Brent said, the self-esteem is really the important part. So there's, a kid a dyslexic kid leaving a comfort zone, going into a different space, whether it's bigger, whether it's the same size, there's going to be things. So if you're as a parent that's, kind of like, okay, I'm going to have be one step ahead, which we never really are. When you're one step ahead, maybe you're just kind of getting even because every time I was like, yes, I did it. And then I was like, crap, I forgot about all that other stuff. I thought I would be reminded, and they don't. So it's one of those things that's really important to know that, but also you have to know your kid. You kind of have to know what they're going to be comfortable with. Cause we've talked about this before. You go in with an IEP, whether it's a new school or not new school, and you have all these accommodations. And I know my son at one point was like, drop that one, he would be like, can you just please drop it? It's so annoying. The teacher will constantly on it, and it really doesn't help me. And it just makes it like I'm standing out and all these different things. But there were certain ones that were really important. So we would talk to him about, okay, what's helping you? What's not? What are you just being a pain because you don't feel like dealing, right? But it's still helping you. You got to figure it out. You got to suck it up, and you got to do it because it's keeping you on the same level as everyone else. And that's what sometimes people don't realize. They're like, well, that kid's getting that read to. And I would have being like in conversations, we've talked about this. A lot of times when someone is dyslexic, you don't know that they're dyslexic, right? You don't know how they are in the classroom. So many times I've been in situations where I'm in peers, and I will have a parent talking about, well, this kid's getting their grades are so much better because they're getting read to and this and that just stuff. I want to rip someone's face off. I get really pissed, and I'll be like, well, maybe that person's dyslexic and they need that accommodation because that accommodation actually evens the playing field. Yeah. And they kind of will look at me. They're like, well, no, I think it's like a 1-up. There's times where I had teachers even say, well, no, that's just going to give him an advantage. And I was like, okay, first of all, no, you clearly don't know anything about dyslexia, and it's not an advantage. It is how he learns. And so you have to fight for that kind of stuff. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But it's really being the advocate and really speaking, to them and being on top of it as much as you said. And that meeting is so important because also the teachers are like, okay, this family cares. And there is something that goes to that where if a teacher does think, okay, this family cares, or they're going to get up in my shit if I don't do it, sometimes they do go above and beyond.
And there's the word dyslexia, is blanket. Your dyslexia is different than mine. Your skills are different than mine. Your weaknesses are different than mine. So each kid has that. So just saying that, on the IEP of the 504, is dyslexic. Okay, to a teacher that's coming in there, yours is each one is different. Your son could, you read him books. You guys talked about signs, walking around New York City, and right now that's like shoot me in the head, kill me.
Everything. If I didn't read it, he would scream. And I'd be like, "Oh my God, I knew every freaking sign." Oh my God.
I knew every sign, but and the one thing that dyslexics don't read, they memorize.
Right. Mm-mm.
So you can memorize, your son can memorize, I can't. My dyslexia is anticipation. My dyslexia is being able to read and understand, almost like mind reading. I know what's going on in them. Or I can finish off sentences from most of the people when I'm working with them, counseling with them. So there's two different versions of it. You guys can, you guys like have almost photogenic memory. I don't.
Montgomery does, not me. I wish I had that. He does, but his is not the photo; it's the audio. He can hear it, but if he reads it, it's totally what you're saying. But that's what was so crazy when he was little. We didn't realize how dyslexic he was. We knew his dysgraphia because his name was Montgomery. I mean, shame on us, right?
Yeah, that's a whole time. We'll talk about that. That's child abuse myself. Jesus.
Totally. My mom was
I'm
like,
TJ or Lee when I go to Starbucks for a reason.
Totally. But he used to be able to listen and really memorize. And that's like, I did not have that. But it's so important, as you said, because there's so many different versions, so many different things. And half of the time on IAPs and 504s, you can't say dyslexia. You have to say learning disability. So then the teachers are like, okay, learning disability. So, which I think is actually one of the worst things, because it's the state basically being like, F you, we're just going to put this. But that's why the neuropsych, and you guys have heard us talk about this so many times. That's why that is so important, because you can break things out a little bit more if you have a neuropsych and you're able to do it. But if you just have the school and they're like, okay, it's learning disabilities. I mean, I remember meeting with the teachers and being like, okay, I'm going to tell you what his learning disabilities are. He's dyslexia. And they would all go, oh, okay. Some of them that knew or understood it, instead of being like, it's I don't know. It's like for some reason, I'm not thinking of some of the other ones, but it just makes such a difference.
I always say disabilities over because people like, what's the difference between a disability and disorder?
Right.
I use disabilities to catch their attention. Right. Because when you say disorder, it doesn't catch people as much. Instead of right. It's really learning difference.
Right.
We just learn differently. But I don't say that because people don't even know what we're talking about. So I want to make sure that I can grab their attention to be able to have a conversation, or to be able to get some time to explain X, Y, and Z. So I will say disability. I agree with you, but to grab that attention, difference, using learning difference doesn't register enough, right now.
It doesn't. You're right. Because we were like, oh, okay, well, they learned it. Great.
Oh, no big deal.
Right.
That's it. Oh, it is a big deal.
Right. Right. And that's the thing. Yeah. No, I mean, and again, and it's been changed so many different, ways. The word blindness, if you haven't caught one of the first episodes, word blindness is actually what dyslexia was referred to in the 1900s. So that's what is, always blows our minds. In 1900s, they knew about it. It's hereditary. So it's 1 in 5. If you have 2 dyslexic parents, you're going to have a dyslexic child. I think it was 100%, which I was like, I need to research that a little bit more. But if you have, 1 dyslexic child, it's 50%. One dyslexic parent, you have 50% as a kid. And I'm clearly getting all effed up in all these statistics. Math is not my strong point. You get the point. But so the thing is, it's changed. There's been words. And I know I've said this to you like 1,000 times, but I want to look up the word dyslexia and find out who, clearly it wasn't a dyslexic person, named it and why. Because, and I know you're always like, why? And that kind of fascinates me. That's where we're a little different.
You want to go down that rabbit hole, but dyslexia is obviously the second most common thing next to cancer. And dyslexia is, I still call it the most corrupt business in the world. And the reason it has become mainstream is because it's not making the government enough money yet, and that's why it's so corrupt. Because that's all it is. It's getting there. They don't want people to think differently and be good and succeed that way.
Right. Because if you look at dyslexia, because we talk about this too, I mean, your IQ is usually higher. There's things that, if you look at statistically dyslexics, they are usually entrepreneurs, and I shouldn't say usually, the entrepreneurs are high,
Wow,
millionaires high. Like
40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic.
Yep. or dyslexic. And it's because of just the way, again, we think out of the box. We have a big picture thinking. We're not like, we're the ones that are coloring out of the box, right? We don't want to be in that box. We want to be out of it. And it's because it's just a very different, your mind just works completely different.
And that's, completely different. When I try and explain to people, I'm like, you guys go in the front door and the back door. We go in the side door. So, as great as it is for big thinking, and be able to get to problems, solve problems, and do things that, outside the box, as you just said, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Right. Here's our positive and negative, right? And I'm teasing you, but it's very true. I mean, we talk about it all the time, how some of the most mundane stuff. And we just recently talked about this because of a new position I took and all of the things that I'm doing. I'm like, I am so tired, like almost tired where like my brain hurts. And I use that term because I'm using my brain. It's working so much harder to do little minute things. There's things that are way easier for me. I can literally talk to anyone. I can communicate with anyone. I can have a conversation. I can interview anyone. That doesn't come easy to everyone. So I understand that is hard for some people. So I can see the flip side. Not everyone can see that flip side.
Yeah. And that's, and what you're mentioning is, would you rather be physically exhausted or mentally exhausted? I remember I had a mom ask me one year, she's like, why do I have my non-dyslexic son who's a senior in high school? It's like 2 a.m. going to bed. But then I have my dyslexic who's a sophomore going to bed at 9 p.m. I'm like, because they say we have to use 3 to 4 times as much brain power to accomplish what you guys do. So we're not physically exhausted every night. We're mentally exhausted, and that's what you just referred. Now you're going through all that paperwork and reading that. It's that mental exhaustion. Through my divorce, I was mentally exhausted. It's 10 times. I'd rather do hot yoga all day long and be physically exhausted than the mentally exhausted.
The mental. And I remember, and it was actually really fascinating, and it really brings up, and this is where I want parents to kind of think about this. But when Montgomery went to the school for dyslexia, I will never forget him coming home and being so tired. It was actually like, I was like, this is so, I actually talked to his guidance counselor, and I was like, I'm just so, and they're like, yeah, we talk about it. Like when we do parent orientation, it was like literally the first week. And I think parent orientation was like, a couple days later or something. And it's like when you have a child goes to kindergarten, right? They talk about that kindergartner because they're using their brain in a different way. And then you put the dyslexia on it and it just adds a whole nother layer. But I will never forget just how tired he was. And he's going into a senior year. I can tell during the year when there's things that he is actually working really, really like more where he doesn't even realize I can see it, but I can see his exhaustion. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, okay, he's comprehending stuff and he's working harder. That's the thing. When he was in, and we talk about this, when he was in regular public school before we knew exactly that it was dyslexia, he wasn't tired. He was trying to do everything. He was doing everything not to like fidget in his chair, but he wasn't learning. He was trying to do everything. Yeah. So he would go under the radar, right? He would go under the radar. So he wasn't using the parts of the brain that were hard. And then when that flip happened, I'll never forget. I was like, holy crap, this is it's really actually fascinating. I mean, it's heartbreaking as well, but it is fascinating just to see and how, he was done.
Well,
and it probably took 3 months.
Yeah, you take a look at, for an example, a hamster wheel. That hamster walking, or running on his little wheel, that's our brain working. He gets off that wheel. That's us not using our brain for, visual, purposes. Oh yeah. I know when I get exhausted, I'm like, just want, I can pass out anywhere. I can sleep anywhere, in an elevator, I don't anywhere. I can be out in a second. But that's the exhaustion part of, not saying the non-dyslexics don't get there for sure.
Right,
but,
of course.
We get there in a different way, a lot quicker, because most it takes a while to get that mental exhaustion.
Yeah.
Their tank's almost bigger than ours are. So I hit that recently, and I'm just like, all right, this I can't function anymore. I'm done, and it's 3 p.m.
Yeah, no, and it really is. I mean, it is, again, just thinking about how fascinating the human brain is and what it does. And if you really do research on dyslexia, the way that what they're saying now, right? Because there's so many things that we still need to learn. There's so many things, as you said, that they don't know. I mean, 1900s, it's been around. And it's changed names, so many, reading disorder, this and that, whatever they've said. But when you're mentally using that brain, and as we just talked about with the new position I'm taking, I forgot, right, what it was like to have that exhaustion. And I brought me back to again, it was like school where I was like, oh, I don't love this feeling. I got to figure this out. But for us, for me, I've always been able to read. I just didn't always comprehend, and still I can read. It just takes me longer. And half of the time I'm not comprehending when I'm reading. So I have to stop and read it, or I need to listen to it. But I'm also the type of person where my son, he can just listen to it. He doesn't need to see it. I kind of like to do both. I need to see it and listen to it. And then I really comprehend it. If I do either or, it's not. But that just reading, and I mean, how many times? And I know there's going to be people out there that are like, oh, wait, I do that. I read something and I don't comprehend it. Yes. This world is a distracted world, right? I mean, people are going to do that, especially if you're not interested in something. But you have to understand, even when we're interested in something, we have to so focus our brain to be able to sit there and be like, okay, what did I just read? What did I just read? Let me make sure I'm comprehending that, because I read the words, but wait a second, I don't know what that means. And then you have to it's not just automatic, where someone that's not dyslexic, when they're reading it, they're comprehending it at the same time.
Yeah.
And again, this is for the most part.
And, I've been coaching hockey last, 8 months. There's times where I'm so mentally exhausted for a weekend where I turned my phone off. I didn't talk to a person. I didn't see a person, and didn't leave my place, because what I saw on the ice, what I'm trying to teach, nobody else did. So by the end of the week or the weekend or whatever it was, I was so fried, so mentally exhausted. I've got, I don't know, so many messages on my phone that I haven't even returned to friends and stuff, is because I've been mentally exhausted trying to teach kids and other coaches to see what I see.
Right.
And there's no right or wrong. Obviously, I was able to have success with getting people skating, moms skating, and kids skating, in a short period of time. Not saying it's right or wrong, but what I'm just trying to teach, they don't see it. And you look at me like I have 10 heads. Mm-hmm. So it's, the mental exhaustion, it's a real thing. It goes back to, why we had this conversation is, going into a new school, you've got to meet with those teachers. Because, your kids.
No, go ahead.
Every kid's different.
Every kid's different. And also, though, there is a point, and this is if you have, if you're listening to this and it's your, child that's dyslexic, if they're not coming home mentally exhausted, they're not learning. Yeah. They're not learning what it is. And that's when I go back to when Montgomery was in that Southport school, he was finally learning. He was finally learning how his brain worked, because they were teaching him how his brain worked. And I remember him, coming home and being again, so tired, but also being yeah, well, this happened and this happened. And also being fascinated, because it was oh my gosh, his brain turned on, because it was I'm actually understanding what they're teaching me. So if your child's going through school and they're not mentally exhausted for a little bit, you might want to say, hey, let's touch base. Let's, see what it is. But as Brent said, sometimes public school is not going to be able to do that. And even private school, because they're not teaching the way your child learns. And yes, it's frustrating, and you can blame the school and blame this and blame that. They're doing what they're told to do. They're doing what they're, it's a frustrating space to be. It's just like, this is one of the reasons why we want to educate, because we want those teachers to listen and be like, you know what? Johnny has been sitting there and I feel like he's not comprehending. Let me touch base, and maybe I can change it up. Or the kid in the class that's like, I don't understand that math question. Instead of saying, hey, how about you focus? Maybe change the way you taught it. Maybe say, you know what, let me see if this works. And stepping out of the box as a teacher, because that's the thing. So if your kid's just sitting there and they're kind of skating through, but they're not, exhausted. No, you don't want to you don't need to stir things up to be like, okay, let's really get this, but you should be aware of it and kind of touch base, because you also don't want your child to be like, I'm fine, failing this, but then their self-esteem. And that's where that part's really important.
But that's interesting.
And it's a fine line.
Interesting you say it that way, is because this past, I don't know, whatever, 6 months or whatever, coach, it was the first time I've ever been mentally exhausted. Now, if I think about it, yes, my divorce, that's a different animal.
That's That's like,
but I've never been mentally exhausted to the extremes that I have. So, if you want to put, why I bring that up, put that in context, my 12 years of school, I didn't learn a goddamn thing.
Right.
Not once. I always say my education probably doesn't take me past grade 8. So it took me I'm almost 47. Holy shit. It took me 47 years to use my brain Yeah, it was really what that ends up coming down to.
Yeah.
It's not saying that I don't use it on it, but use it because I had to learn how to teach it in different ways so that non-dyslexics could understand. I had to learn how to read their faces so I knew if they were understanding it or not, because so many people are like, oh, does that make sense? Oh, yeah. Just kind of give them the nod. So I was using my brain basically in learning ways and learning depths for the first time, 47 years later.
Right. Because of all your success with hockey, that is where you shine. That was your strength. Right. So that was your gift. That was, God's gift. So when you did that, yes, you had to work hard. I mean, and then there's all the ups and downs, emotional stuff that you had to go through and all of that. But that is a difference than what you just said. And I kind of love that. But it's because you are, okay, wait, I want to make sure this kid is understanding me. So then you're using a side of your brain that you haven't really tapped into. And so it's also been like a beneficial thing for you to be like, okay, wait, I need to kind of reach them here and be here and know, okay, this is how they're learning, but I have to adjust the way I normally am teaching and learning. And that is a gift. I mean, that is a huge gift, because not a lot of people can do that.
No, but it was until you kind of said the way you said it, I'm like, there was many times where I didn't speak to anybody for 2, 3, 4. Again, I got messages on my phone so I've been kind of mentally exhausted for many months now, because this is the first 46 years I've used my brain to learn.
Right.
I've never done it, y'all, this way. So, you talk about your kid coming home exhausted. There I am, like, I don't move. I don't talk to anybody, I'll be in my, apartment. I don't want to, I don't like you. I hate the world. I was just so exhausted. So it's funny the way you said it. First time ever that.
And I love when we do that. By the way, I love when we talk about something and I say something or you say something and we're like, wait, I didn't think about it that way, or I didn't. That is one thing that this podcast, this is another reason why is so important, because when you have conversations, things are brought up differently than someone else. And I have so many times with my podcast, someone will say, I never thought of it that way. I never thought of it that way. And it really is when people remain curious. I know you always laugh at that because you are curious, so stop.
You just ask questions.
Yeah, but no, you ask questions. But yes, I ask way more. But when you're curious that way and kind of keep your mind working in all different ways, whether you're dyslexic, non-dyslexic, there's things that you can give to the world by just adjusting and being like, let me understand how someone else learns. Let me understand. And especially when you're in school, when we talk about the self-esteem, when you see that kid struggling or you see something's not right, don't be the teacher that just brushes it under the rug because you're like, you know what, I don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. And we're now going back to like the young grades. We've talked about this a million times. No one wants to be a class clown and no one wants to be a bully when they're young. Really, no one in life, but like when they're young, that's a huge sign that something's going on. Yes, could it be something different, or could it be that they're just not learning and they're seeing what other kids are doing? We in other podcasts, we talk about this in other episodes that I knew it in third grade when everyone else went to gifted and talented, and it was said you all going to gifted and talented, and you two are going to special reading, and it was like, oh, great, that sounds fun. It sounds awful, but those are the kind of things that we need to, as society, as adults, we need to keep talking about and bringing awareness about it, because there's so much out there in the world right now. There's so many people struggling, but if we could just make it a little bit better by kind of understanding each other. And it goes all back to like, yeah, not everyone learns the same. And it doesn't mean you're dumb because you're not learning the same. It means that your brain is wired different.
Yeah. And then, as a parent who doesn't have dyslexia, if you got a dyslexic child, you're beating your head against the wall, and it's not easy. It's listening to things like that. You'll never see what I see. I think just like we talked about last time, is going to a counselor or a therapist or whatever you guys want to talk about. It's, if that person, to me, and this is my opinion, it hasn't been through your traumas, they're just counseling out of a book. They're just lying to you. If you're trying to go to a counselor or therapist about dyslexia and they don't have dyslexia, they have zero idea what is going on. None. And they're basically lying to you. So there's so much information out there now, than back in the dial-up internet, Oregon's Trail. I hated when my wheel broke.
That's so funny. That's actually a funny memory. Yeah.
I miss those days. Because these games nowadays, I'm like, I can't. And then this computer and AI, I'm like, I can't. I'm like, here's my piece of paper. Let's write it all down. Oh, you don't put it on your phone? No. First off, my screen's all broken. It's cracked and busted. I hate
your new
technology.
One is?
Yeah, it's been like that for months.
I feel like you just got a new one for months. That's hilarious.
Well, I dropped it 6 months ago, and that's how much I want to go and get it fixed.
Yeah.
First time ever that I've broken a screen, though. I think my kids have broken 9,322 of them.
I know.
I'm like, that, and they eat their cell phone chargers. I'm like, what do you guys do with these things?
And then someone always takes it.
Sure.
Like, wait, no, mine is over here.
Yeah. Why? See that one? Leave it there. It's a different world.
It's a different world.
We always talk about how we grew up. We could go ride our bikes. Be gone till dark.
Mm-hmm.
We can't now. And how much information's out there, and good information, bad information. You only know your kid as best as you know your kid, better than we do. And that's why it's going to, you can have the words, learning disorder, you can have the word dyslexia, you can have the word ADHD, you can have it on any piece of paper, but it's going to be different for each kid, each person, so it's very,
and each family, as you said. That's the thing. As I have so many friends that maybe, and I think we've talked about this, like that their husband is the dyslexic one, and the wives will say to me, I don't understand. Like, it drives me nuts that they are doing this or they're doing that. And I'm like, you just have to pause. Like you can't be the one that's being hard on them, right? Because it's like, and again, hard, yes, there's certain things that you can do, but, and I shared with you, I mean, I've now probably talked about it 4 times. So if you listen to this episode, you're going to be like, all right, she's talked about this a couple of times. But like when Montgomery was doing his homework and it was 3rd grade, obviously it was the year before we sent him to, I think it was actually 2nd grade. It was 2nd grade and he was doing his homework. It was 2nd grade and I'm stirring, like doing stuff.
You're cooking.
Yeah. And the kids are running around and the dogs. But like, I was like, just focus, honey. What are you doing? I'm totally ADHD. I wouldn't have been able to focus. Why am I expecting this little child to be able to focus? But I didn't think about it. But that was like, we both ended up in tears because I felt terrible. I was like, honey, he's like, Mom, I can't focus. Everyone's running around and the dogs are barking and the kids are screaming. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. If anyone else came into this environment.
Because you had dogs. So,
yeah, chasing each other, barking through the house.
You bring up an interesting topic. There is the wives. So the non-dyslexic, well, that's a whole rabbit hole. We'll leave that alone. I mean, that aren't the non-ADHD parent or adult. They've lived, whatever long, 20 years, 30 or 40 years, however they all without it. It's a lot for them to take in if they don't understand it too.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, men and women couldn't sound like, God, why did you kind of make them so different? You couldn't make it a little bit closer. Let's just make it as far as possible. Okay, right, all right, no different. What? Okay, no problem. But if you don't understand the ADHD portion of it, and then you add that into it, that makes anything tough. Your kid, especially your husband or wife of opposite sex. So now you've got, as far as you get, then you're going to add on that. So it's, doing some research or listening to some podcasts like this to learn more about them in a different way.
I understand.
Exactly. It's, you and I stumbled on like what you just said, saying things, we never thought about it that way. For them to do that. And again, it's, why am I going to do some research to learn about him or her? It's going to make your life a lot easier. And you're probably going to hear it in a different form, kind of like we just did now, than they would be able to tell you. So it's instead of getting frustrated, and I get it. I was married, never again, couldn't pay me again. Nope. You're all crazy.
Sorry, it makes me laugh because it's
but to learn about
when you're saying you're all crazy, are you talking about the females?
Look at that bird! Look at that beautiful bird flying over there. To learn
nice way, right?
Yeah, to learn about the whoever your husband or wife, in a different way, because it's only going to make your life easier because you're going to be able to understand them better. If that makes any sense.
100%. And I mean, it is because we've talked about this so many times. And, I will have, again, a mom being like, oh, he's getting tutored here. He's coming out of school. He's getting tutored. He can't do that sport because he's getting tutored. And I'm like, why in the world would you do that? And they're like, well, he needs to get good grades. Now, again, where I've raised my kids, it's a little bit more of an intense environment. So like that is, not saying that's important, not important, whatever. It depends on where you are. But I would just be like, no, think about how tired that child is. Like they need to go and relax. Here's another thing that just kind of came to my mind. Your kid comes home from school, and this is all different ages. I would have friends that would be like, no, we do homework right away. Because if they don't do it, then they get too tired. Now, I think that works for some kids.
For sure.
But other kids, it's like they need that break. And if they don't have that break, then the homework and everything becomes even more hard. Now I would have, a friend be like, no, if they don't do it right away, then it's a fight because the kid doesn't feel like doing it and they don't do it. And I was like, that's where you need to find the happy median. You need to figure it out, but also like, are they getting too much homework? Is their homework not like homework is not supposed to be where you're crying and it's hard. Every teacher has always said that to me every year. They're like, no. What are you talking about? I'm like, well, then first of all, I think homework is stupid. I know that just sounded very elementary, but don't even get me started on homework. And my kids know, and they think it's hilarious. They're like, Mom, I love that I think it's, you're supposed to be teaching it in the class. Why do they need to be doing some busy work at home just so they can say they're doing something? Yes, I know there's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this that completely disagree with me, but I think for certain kids, homework, it doesn't make sense. So if you have that extra help class or you have the study hall, that's where I would always say to my kids, just go there. Even my kids that are not dyslexic, just go there and get it done. Or like and whoever's listening to this, but I have one child that would be like, oh, first period, I don't really have to do anything. So that's when he would do his homework. And I'd be like, oh, all right, well, forget whatever, however you do it, but don't fight about it at home. There's plenty of things.
And that's that self-esteem that we talk about, dyslexic, non-dyslexic, smart, advanced classes, whatever. Anytime you get to tears, anytime you get to frustration, that's where that self-esteem comes in and goes down. Yep. And I don't care who they are. I don't care if she's a senior high school. I don't care if he's a freshman in high school. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you're from, white, black, green, purple, race, religion. If anything gets to tears, then now self-esteem is going down. And that is my number one thing. And you always talk about this. That's why, what I talk about, my foundation, I focus on things different than anybody else. I don't care, in the dyslexic world, I don't care about reading and writing. I don't care. Because if you don't have self-esteem, I don't care who you are. I don't know if you're going to Harvard or you're me who didn't get better than past grade 8. If you're a fireman or you're an IT tech, or if you're a garbage man or woman, if you don't have self-esteem and if you're not having fun, you're not learning. You're not excelling at whatever that is. So, and anytime anything gets to the tears portion or the frustrated portion, now that self-esteem is going down.
And you need to check yourself, right?
And so you're right. Some people get it done when you can get home. Great. You can do that. If that works, great. Some of them, you need that space, that time. Great. Yeah. For you and I think homework is dumb because we struggle at it. School is... School, it was the worst 8 hours in 12 years of my life, and to put this, I wanted to shoot myself every day. So, and some people love going there. They excel at it. That's where they got their self-esteem. That self-esteem went up because they enjoyed it. They succeeded at that science class, at math class. I didn't. And I think, I think I can say you didn't either. So that's why the school portion wasn't good for us. It did the opposite. It brought that self-esteem down. It's a gas tank. So some of them going to school, that gas tank went up. Ours went down. And any time it goes down, no matter where you are, at a field, in a science lab, and physics lab, space center, I don't care. Anywhere that's going down, it's trouble.
It is. And I mean, we talk about this. I had, there's times where I have to go sign up the kids for something. And when I walk into school, like it is, and I think I'm a pretty well-adjusted human. I mean, you could go either way. I'm fairly well-adjusted, but I still get like, I got to take a breath. And it surprises me at times. And then you always laugh at me because I'll be like, yeah, I got into an argument with, and I can be feisty, but I'm also not someone that like argues just to argue. But there's certain things that I get tweaked, and I still get tweaked, and I'm going to be 50 this year, and I still get tweaked because of the experience that I had in school. And it was always, why aren't you trying? Why aren't you trying? I mean, I went to college, so I don't make me do the math. I mean, I did.
So
I
more
said
than more than
12,
me.
13, 14, 15, 15, 16, something
So
like that.
16 years of basically trauma. You don't get rid of that.
No, and I have to say, college, I mean, we did talk about that. That is when I realized how I learned. But the first couple years were like when I had to take anatomy and physiology, and I was like, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing?
Can't
Then I
even
changed to
say those words.
communications.
Never mind, write them or go to that class. And the
Oh, it
textbook's
was
not thick. It's
terrible.
just
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was terrible. And I still can remember. I mean, I can still remember it. But
and that's my point right
yeah.
there, is that you still remember it. It's still your trauma. 'Cause, and again, that's why we talk about trying to get kids tested, at a young age, and understand, who they are at a younger age. Like get cancer, you want to find out stage 1, not stage 4, and that's what we're trying to talk about: learning disorders and ADHD and dyslexia. If you find out at grade 2 or grade 3, like my daughter, grade 2, she's got less scars than me.
Mm-hmm.
So your trauma, you went to school, you didn't basically find out for the first 14 years of school, how you learned. So you don't just all of a sudden hit the delete button. We're not computers anymore, and that's gone. And by the way, delete,
Yeah.
it's still not deleted, You've
done work, and we've all done work. Yeah,
Correct.
I mean, we've all done work, and that's the thing. We've done work where we're healthily moving forward, but there's certain triggers that happen. And I think one of the things that you also just brought up that's, is, and again, if you've listened to other episodes, like the neuropsych, the reason why we say that is because you can be dyslexic, you can be ADHD. There's like, and I'm not going to go through the percentages because I can't remember off the top of my head. But there's percentages of when you have each. There's dysgraphia, there's dyscalculia. So if you just go to the school and get like the LD, right? You have the learning disability under the umbrella, but you're not dysgraphic or you're not ADHD, like you're going to you're going to have a whole different skill set that you need to be taught different. So again, yes, this is putting a lot on a school and education system, but if you don't know how that child learns, so like, okay, the kid's dyslexic, he's also ADHD, and maybe what we've talked about, like maybe he's sitting there and you would never know he's ADHD because he's really trying not to get in trouble. And so he's sitting there and he's not doing anything, but he's not hearing you and he's not listening to you because what he's doing is telling his body to sit still because education, right? You have to sit still. You have to sit at that desk. I mean, that's we talk about this so much. It's so backwards. Like really, most people learn best if they're moving and doing things. But of course, in a traditional setting, that's very hard for a school to have that chaos. Not everyone's going to flow into it. There's so much studies on it, but it is, again, as you said, the earlier you find out, the earlier things can be addressed, and the earlier things can be like, okay, here are your strengths. And then as a parent, because the school is always going to kind of go on, well, no, they need to work on this. They need to work on that. Right. And I don't even want to get into that because that pisses me off. But as a parent, you can really look at the strengths and be like, okay, let's kind of build these up as we continue through school. And we know that in school, they're going to kind of get knocked down because even if you know about it, you're going to get knocked down, right? I mean, you're going to get knocked down. Now, someone might be also listening to this. I interviewed someone for my podcast a long time ago, and she was telling me her scars in school is because she didn't get into gifted and talented in 3rd grade. And then she was able to make it in 4th grade. Okay. And her entire rest of her education, she never felt worthy enough, that she was never smart enough, that her mom got her into the gifted and talented. And when she said that, I was like, you know what that is? That's something too. That's someone feeling less than, and their self-esteem was still kicked because they didn't get into a program that they were supposed to because all of her siblings got into it. She was the youngest, and it was like, oh, you didn't get into it. And so again, it's the self-esteem. It's the self-esteem and the things that the kind of messages that we give ourselves, but also the messages that we can get from school, but our own selves. And as as parents, sometimes we give to our kids that we don't even realize when we're even trying to be positive, but we don't, because we say things that we think are encouraging, but they're not, because we don't understand. So that's what it's so important to like listen, as you said, listen to this. If you're someone that wants to read about it, just have a little bit of understanding.
Yeah. And life isn't easy, and every person and every kid is different. And, Kids might have came out out of the same place, but two different, animals. They're completely different. Life isn't easy. So it's, the more that you can understand about, like dyslexics don't read, we memorize. Oh, but he recited all that back. Oh yeah, because you memorized.
Yeah. My kid was king at that.
Yeah. So there's so much information that is out there. Every kid is different. Every person's different. Yeah. Every human's different. It's just trying to be armed with, as much information as you can, and know that every person is very different, and that's okay. It's just doing what you can for each kid. My daughter's different than my other daughter. They're complete. They're not the same, not even close to the same. So it's having kids. Life isn't easy. Anybody who thinks it is, Desperate Housewives and White Picket Fence, you're out of your mind. And anybody who says it is, they're lying. So, we're just here to talk about our experiences and trying to make things. You asked why the foundation. I just never want a kid to feel the way I do every day. So it's one kid, one person, one parent at a time. Trying to help them. Help their kid to not feel the way I do.
I love that. And with that, you guys might be listening to this and say, oh, this is interesting, but you don't know who in your life needs to hear it. You don't know what neighbor, what teacher, what, friend, family member. Actually, this could help. The series that we are putting out, Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. It's not just our stories and our family stories, but it's also other people's stories. And the more that we can educate, the more that we can talk about, and the more that we can kind of bring awareness and make you guys think, well, wait a second, you know what? Let me learn a little bit more about that. That's what we want to do. So share this with as many people as you can, and like, rate, and review, and we'll see you guys again.